Mark one collar in organza. Leave the organza square so that you can flatline it to the fabric, which is also square. Mark one collar for the facing, center front, center back, and a piece of bias 2 inches wide, or wider if your fabric is super soft and thin. French seam the shoulders. Thread mark center front and the front edge. Fold back the seam allowance 3/8 of an inch and pink it. If your fabric is super thin, bag out the facing with organza like the wool bodice. Fold the seam allowance back on the finish line and stitch only from center front to the fold. Clip and trim. Press the corner and then press all the seam allowance back. Lay it flat and baste the little corner of seam allowance together with the next seam allowance, and then remark the stitching line. This is the top collar pin for flatlining. Bag out the outside edge of the collar, trim, clip, and grade the seam allowances. The longer side of seam allowances is on the piece with the organza. I've basted the 2 layers of collar together just inside the stitching line, so I can go back and mark the correct stitching line on the neck edge on the under collar. Pin the center front and the notches at the shoulder seam first, then pin in between. Press the bias into a curve. Trim the bias down. Wrap the bias around the seam allowance. Pin it to the dress form and give it some steam.